Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions about media production. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Courtney, what do we have?
All right. First up is from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. And he says, morning, everyone. Would the panel rather build a fiber campus network spanning several buildings using Netgear M4250s or Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pros? Noting the network feeds service for AV production, office use, campus Wi-Fi, etc. Thanks.
Probably not either. I think that most of the time when you see campus-wide solutions, you're probably going to see something that looks a lot like Cisco. So some version of Cisco, a campus. The last campus that I worked at, they were using Meraki. We see a lot of big companies using Meraki to do those kinds of things. But otherwise, Cisco infrastructure to make that work. It's just a different scale. I haven't seen either one of those used heavily in a large-scale implementation. So for a small office or a studio, they make perfect sense. But I don't think that they're necessarily the solution that you would use multi-building for hundreds and hundreds of folks. Again, I think that Cisco has kind of cornered that market, and so they do that pretty well at scale. So I probably look at Cisco for that. Next question.
This one comes in from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. He says, are there any updates about streaming office hours on platforms other than YouTube?
Yeah. Working on it every day. So I'm doing some testing for both. I'm doing testing right now, and we'll probably start doing testing in the system. You got an open mic there, Chris.
Sorry.
I'm doing testing for Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the next big ones. We may do Facebook as well, more as an R&D perspective. I don't expect us to see any real impact from Facebook, but we may use it as a test just to look at what it looks like to go out to that platform. One of the big reasons we want to go to all these platforms is to figure out the idiosyncrasies. So there are some that I expect to have. I expect some impact from Twitter because I've got 40,000 followers or 39,000 followers or something like that. And we want to start building up that or X, I guess. I don't know if I'm ever going to call it X, but Twitter, but we'll start, we want to start looking at what that looks like. And I think we can get a lot of people to watch it. And we want to see how does it interact with the live streaming video versus how does it interact with Spaces? Like, do we get a lot of people on Spaces? Does that work? So those are two different kinds of streaming to Twitter that we just want to learn. We will, Facebook is another one. Again, it's more about learning how the platform interacts with what we do than it is about impact on that platform. Same thing with Twitch. I don't think we'll get a lot of impact from Twitch, but we want to know how it works. So the goal is that when you ask questions about how do we stream to Twitter or how do we stream to Facebook or if we're doing it every day or at least a couple times a week, we think that we'll know more to talk about. LinkedIn is a big one for us because I have a lot of contacts there, and so but I'm also more nervous about that one. So I just want to make sure that that's why we're kind of that one will be a little bit more. We're going to build a community site on that, and I'm actually going to talk to those folks about that. But we're going to build a community site on LinkedIn, but that's the one that I'm probably the most excited about and also the most nervous about, just because it's more of our professional group, and it's what we've kind of worked towards the whole time, in my eyes. Go ahead, Courtney.
I want to add to that question a little bit because sure. I'm not on the socials, I'm not a social gadfly. Do they, if we live stream on Facebook and the others, do they archive there, or will our archives only be available on our website or on YouTube channel?
Yeah, I think that they do archive. You can see the archives later. I'm probably not going to archive very many other places, mostly because I'm more interested in people coming back to us. But we will probably leave some archives up in locations. We haven't been doing that with the current YouTube ones because I think it would be really weird on the same platform to have like 3 videos of the same thing floating around YouTube. So we have the ones that we've streamed to the Pixel Core site and to the Alex Lindsay on YouTube so far. We have chosen to put those in non-DVR, non-save, just so you can see them if you're there. I do think that we're losing
live stream only. Then, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're losing some opportunity there because I think that folks that are watching on, would get a notification for Pixel Core or for the Alex Lindsay channel and see it later, and then be told over and over again to come back to us. So I think there's some opportunities to put those videos up. We may put some shorts up there. Like that, just to kind of give people a sense of it. But we do want to make sure that it's mostly just a service to the folks that have been on those other 2 channels that, hey, this is a great channel for you to go to. And we have seen huge, not huge, but relatively large surges when we do it to those channels. So maybe 4 or 5 times what we normally get on a given day. So it's so I think that it's effectively introducing us to folks that were already following us or me or other things that we're doing. So we want to keep on doing that. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think as the footprint gets bigger, it's interesting to see the impact of it. I've been amazed at how many questions come in via the QR code.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like the simplest little thing to add. And, well, I'm sure there's some back-end stuff. Sorry, I'm not trying to minimize that. But
so not simple.
Yes, totally simple. But no, you just add that graphic, Alex. That's all it takes.
Exactly.
I mean, but to see the impact of it is quite interesting. And also, I was going to say, on Twitter, is there like I haven't spent a lot of time looking for it. Is there like a place where you can go where you can see like all the videos, or is it
Not really
just you got to follow a person and follow their link?
What happens on Twitter is when something goes live, there's a little section in the upper right corner that will say, hey, someone that you're following or someone that you're connected to is live. So there is a little notification. So if you're following us on Twitter, or following me on Twitter, you would see this little notification, Alex Lindsay is live or whatever. And then you get, if you're following that person, or I think it's if people have who follow you have liked it, those types of things, you'll get that notification. And usually
it's like a pink bar or something.
Yeah, it's up in the upper right. I usually see 2 or 3 live things going on all the time. It's almost always sitting up in the upper right. So, and again, we don't know. We don't know until we start streaming into it.
Exactly.
And so we did find that our style worked really well in Clubhouse. We just decided Clubhouse wasn't worth doing because it was just all of us. Yeah. But we did find that us pumping our show into Clubhouse was pretty effective, with the way we manage questions as opposed to the way they manage them, which was chaos.
Clubhouse still a thing?
I think they're pivoting to something else. They got a lot of money, so you got time to if you lay up enough people, you can get a lot with millions of dollars. You can last a long time. So you'd be surprised at how long you can last once you don't have a large payroll. So I think that's I think that they're pivoting, trying to figure out which way is up. I think that what was interesting was that I don't know if everybody knew, but a lot of us knew what was wrong with Clubhouse almost in the first day. Like the way that they were managing the conversations was not ever going to work, and Twitter just barely works. Twitter Spaces just barely works in that environment. We're going to open a mic to anyone is not a way to run a show. It just really is chaos, and you can't, the problem right now in the current infrastructure of social media, you can't really have an open-ended, like we're going to bring anybody in because you can't verify who they are. So if you could do that, you'd be able to fix it.
Especially since you don't use your real name if you're using something else.
Yeah, real names and harder verification of ID would fix a lot of things. It's just that people resist that. So
not to mention audio only, so you have no idea what creep is ready to.
Well, also you just can't see who's got their hand up. They just have to kind of do these weird little signals where they turn it on and off, or they put their hand up, or they they do whatever. And I think that it's a little chaotic. So, and the problem really is with Twitter is that Twitter wants to leverage the idea that you'll tweet out, you'll use hashtags. They always tell you to use these, ask your question and put in the hashtag and blah, blah, blah. But all you get are people with not very many followers, because if you've got a lot of followers, nobody wants to play because you don't want to spam your own, you're not going to ask questions to some random show and spam your followers with that question. So you really, it's really a low grade attraction device. So yeah. Next question.
This one comes in from Craig Kadoki up in Toronto, Canada. He says, DJI is now promoting live streaming from their drones. How long before we get drones with streams or special video?
We've actually done
stereo.
Stereo.
Let me
stereo. Yeah.
Stereo or special.
You gotta read these more often. Anyway, the stereo. We've done these already with DJIs. The one thing you have to be careful of with a DJI drone, just if you're wondering, is you'll have a DJI drone. Think of it here, and then it's got the little legs, and it's got the little spinners on it, and little propellers. I just hit the wrong button. So the thing is you'll hang your device under here like a Theta. Like you think it's nice and light. But the problem is a lot of the bottom is being caught up by this drone, and you want to get more in the top. So what you'll do is you'll try to extend the Theta a little lower down, so that this is smaller in frame. That creates a really complicated weight ratio for the DJI. And what you'll find, not that this has ever happened to me, but you'll find that if it goes up, it'll start rocking back and forth, and then it will just start spinning, going all over the place, no matter, because it can't figure out which way is up. It's got this weird weight, pendulum on the bottom of it that it's not designed to handle, and that's the end of that drone. Like, just in case you're wondering, like you got to put, you can kind of put it back together, but it's never the same. But we've done. We put Ozos onto octocopters already, and so those were, the Ozos are pretty big cameras, and the cameras in the octocopters big. Of course, you lose a lot because of what's above you, but it's pretty cool. The problem really that you have with drones in stereo, and especially drones with spaces, that's Apple's like 180 degree and 360 when you're doing Meta or Oculus. The problem you really get into is that movement and VR don't go together super well when it comes to the camera. So the challenge you get yourself into is that if for most people, if their inner ear tells them that they are someplace and their eyes tell them something different, they get sick. And this is because the only time that happened in the last million years is when you ate the wrong mushrooms, or ate the wrong apple, so you start getting sick, and your eyes, what you're seeing gets disconnected from and that's why you try to eject everything, all the contents of your stomach, because you're afraid that there's something in there. So when people get seasick, it's because they have a very sensitive inner ear. And so the problem you get into with VR is that we don't have any reference points. So if you do stereo 16:9 and you still see the edges, you'll be fine. But when you lose your reference points of where things are, and you see stereo, what happens is things are moving past you, but your inner ear isn't registering that, and it makes some people, like I have a very poor performing inner ear, so I can handle almost anything. So it doesn't, but if you have a high performing inner ear, you'll get sick really quickly. And we have this problem. The other thing that affects this is frame rate. So as that frame rate increases, 24 doesn't really. One of the advantages of 24 for narrative is that our brain just looks at it going, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake all the time. So it doesn't bother us when we have big moves and do all this other stuff. As we increase the frame rate, our brain has less ability to separate it from reality. So low frame rate, like 24 frames a second, is a good narrative platform because it is because you can do anything you want with the camera. It generally won't bother anybody because it's low frame rate. As you go into the higher frame rates, I would say medium frame rate is 60 frames a second. You start to notice it. But at high frame rates, like 120 frames a second, 90 frames, 120 frames a second, your brain stops being able to manage that. And we saw that with a lot of people got sick with Gemini Man, which was 120 frames a second at Dolby. And because it was 120 frames a second, people started to have issues with that from their inner ear perspective. So those are the things you have to think about there. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I was wondering how the Vision Pro conquers that problem. If you're doing, surround video or at least 180 video, and you have the thing on your head so that you don't have any frame of reference
Guidance.
It's
wetware. It's guidance. Like Apple tells you, don't do it. Like when you're producing stuff, like see that thing, don't do that.
This thing we spent billions of dollars on and selling for $3,500. Don't use it.
No, it's
might get sick.
We learned pretty early on, both with Oculus and then the Quest and with a variety of other headsets. The filmmaking process for headsets is just different. You can play films and make them look like they're a theater. In fact, one thing that I've learned is that most of the movies look better if you put them in Apple has like a Apple Theater inside of the headset, and it's nice and big. And Meta has this as well. One of the most used apps on the Quest, by the way, is Netflix. So watching movies. Instead of buying a really big screen, just buy a headset. So there's a big open theater with nobody in it. Yay! So that you can watch these movies, and the low frame rate doesn't bother you there. Where it bothers you is if you leave your background on. So if you have your desk and you just put a movie screen in front of it, the outside part is running at 90 frames a second. The movie is running at 24 frames a second, and that bothers you because suddenly you're noticing how low frame rate. You don't notice how low frame. Most of the time when we're watching film, we're watching it against a flat wall, and that flat wall isn't updating very often, and we're not moving with our heads. The big thing is that when we move with our heads, you see the frame rate all the time, and so it's better to have. I've learned that you really have to have a static theater. You want to have a static background behind what you're watching in VR because 24 frames a second is really low frame rate. Like it's, and so it's very low. And if you compare it to reality and you compare it to other things moving behind it, it looks much worse than it normally does.
So the trick is to have a static camera upon capture and let the person generate the movement with their head, and that way their inner ear coordinates with the movement of their head. Yep. And so it doesn't create the.
You're letting them explore the show. It's just a different experience. You're not, and I don't know. We've built. So one of the things we've done in 360 is that we have built experiences in 360 that you have to watch for a while. So it's a 2.5 minute loop, but we've had people watch it for 30, 40 minutes because there's all these different things going on around you. So we set up, in one take. We have all this stuff happening, and sometimes we add effects and everything else to it. But the point is that it gives you a reason. Like we did a music video for somebody that we put all the band members on the outside of the ring, and you're standing on the inside of the ring. And in that sense, you kind of could not walk around, but look around and see everybody playing. And so for some people that was great. For other people, they'd rather it be all in front. What's interesting is also I took some spatial video of my daughter. She was at a place doing a concert, a rock concert. She's in a couple bands, and so they were both playing. And so I took some. I took most of the stuff in 4K 60, but I took one song from each band that she was playing in that night. I took it in spatial, and what's really interesting with the headset is that it sounds a certain way when and it's 3D and you see it and it's spatial.
If you're doing spatial audio capture as well.
Here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
When you click the button that says surround, it pops up, it gets soft on the outside, and the sound changes, into something that feels much more spatial than it did before. I don't know if it's spatial, but it feels more spatial as it works. And I found that to be fascinating. I haven't tested. She hasn't allowed me to go to her rock concerts with a headset on to videotape it yet. That's been a big ixnay, but so anyway, but it's an interesting experiment.
Yeah, go with the headset on and with a dummy head stuck on top of your hat to record the spatial audio.
Binaural, yeah, exactly. Standing very still and being very upset with everybody who bumps into me. Hey, I'm recording here. And then you'll just hear that down below. Or or a big shirt on the back that says "Recording, don't touch me." That would make me the coolest dad ever. Go ahead, Chris.
She's a very, very smart girl. Couple of questions. So the spatial recording, you're doing that on your phone?
Yeah.
And is that a 15 only feature? And is it just one of the settings? So it's like
it's just when you open up
cinematic spatial.
Yeah. What happens is when you open it up as a regular video, you can't use it with anything else. I think right now, you open up when you click video on the phone, it immediately you'll see this little goggles button on the 15, and then you can tap on that goggles button, and you're off to the races. And
does it then use the two noise canceling microphones in the phone to get its offset for the spatial recording?
I don't know. I have to do some more research on that. I didn't until last night. So the problem really is that it generates these massive files, that are gigs of, every 3 minutes is gigs of data. And so so the problem that I had was it just wasn't updating correctly. So I finally had to AirPlay it, or air drop it to my computer because it wasn't updating photos because it was supposed to be in photos. It just never actually updated. So there was kind of some rigmarole to get it in. and then I had to compress it because you can't text it to anybody. Of course, I've got all these parents of the other band members and stuff like that want to see the video because I'm the only one that shot the video. When you're a video guy, you go to a concert, everybody's got vertical video and they're standing somewhere in the crowd and their camera's going back and forth and there's heads and everything else. I just shouldered my way into the exact position that I had scouted before the concert of this is the position where I can see all the band members at one time. And then I hold it perfectly still the entire time. So of course everybody wants that footage. So anyway, but I was just using my phone. I didn't bring a Blackmagic camera. I didn't bring lights. I did afterwards offer to replace the backline and bring in cameras if they'll let me because their backline is horrible.
Backline, you're talking about their amps?
Yeah, like all that stuff. Like the amps they can leave, but their subsystem was like, anyway, it was bad. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I just thought of a great accessory for the Apple iPhone market for the iPhone 15. It's a little Barbie head that plugs into the USB slot and has tiny little microphones in the ears of the Barbie
there you
head
go.
to do the recording.
Yeah, that would be great.
Stereo.
But it would be, I think that I do want to try taking an ambisonic mic and putting it in. But the reality is at a concert, you don't really need that. What you really want is the stems. You want the stems and then to remix, the stems if you're going to do something. But there's not that much spatial. I mean, the reality is audio at a live event.
This just turned into a whole night of a week of work just by going to see your daughter play a gig.
A week of work. If it's only a week of work, I'll be lucky. So,
wow.
But it'll be spread out over many weeks. So anyway, but
just go to the show and enjoy it.
I'm not good at that. That's not what I do. Anyway, next question.
All right. Coming in from John Foltz in Seelings Grove, Pennsylvania. After testing Blackmagic Cloud service, I wish it was a bit better. No thumbnails on the web page, no shift-click to select multiple clips. Not as easy or functional as, say, Frame.io or Alteon. I don't think it's ready for prime time yet. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Chris.
It doesn't surprise me, John, that somebody was disappointed with a new product rollout. This is pretty standard fare. I mean, if you think about it, everything that's ever going to get advertised or marketed, they're going to show you it in its best light. They're going to show it to you, working perfectly. This is pretty normal. Blackmagic is a pretty good company. Got a whole lot of engineers. It'll get better. Will it be perfect on rollout? Probably not, but you should you should kind of expect that. You may have heard me in the past talk about how skeptical I am about any demonstration or even certainly a product announcement and even like an NAB demonstration. I know the people that make those kind of demos and I know how hard they work to make them, look smooth and look perfect. So is it going to work right in the beginning? No, it probably won't. It'll get better. Be patient.
Yeah, the disadvantage of coming in early is that nothing, there's a whole bunch of things that are rough, as Chris said, and things aren't going to work perfectly there. The advantage of going in early is that you oftentimes have a lot more say. So you giving them feedback, you're one of the few people that are using it at the beginning, and you giving them feedback means that they, over time, you oftentimes see the features, especially if you're articulate about it. So if you say, well, this doesn't work, they just ignore you. But if you say, when I click on this, this is what happens, and this is what I would expect, and this is why this makes a difference for not for me, but if you give them context of this is why people like me would want that, and this is the operation that I want it to do, and you send those to them all the time. So like on all the apps that Apple has that say send feedback, I probably send feedback at least once a week. And oftentimes when I'm working, I might send 3 or 4 of them a day, up of like, I really wish Keynote did this, or I really wish Keynote did that, or I really wish that, pages or numbers or whatever it is that I'm in, it has a little send feedback. What I learned is I don't have to fill out all of those things. I can just like say just fill out the things that are important and then send it away because it's like a standard, radar fill out or whatever that has stuff for everything. But you only need to put little bits and pieces into it. Anyway, that matters. Like what I've been amazed by is different companies have feedback, and I've sent feedback to lots of different companies, and I'm surprised at how often they follow up. Like, hey, can you tell us a little bit more about this? Or can you look at something? And a lot of times what happens is you tell them something that is interesting because they're thinking about the same thing. Like they're thinking about something in that realm, and you are giving them feedback, and suddenly you'll get a whole bunch of attention because they're trying to figure that out and they're looking for your input on it. So the advantage of using it right now is that, and also to get to know it, because most likely if you're using the Blackmagic, if you're using Resolve and you're using their cameras, there's a merging that's coming together here that's going to be really interesting. And it's not perfect yet, but I have learned over time not to underestimate Blackmagic's ability to execute. Like, it takes them time, and they'll throw things out there, but you'll see these things. Like when Resolve came out, it was kind of a joke when it first came out, and you just kept on watching it. The 12 world or 11
Resolve
world or
as
whatever,
an editor.
As an editor, Resolve was an incredible color. But as they
yeah.
started adding editing, it was really missing lots of features. Same thing that's happening here. And you just kept on watching hundreds of items updated every single, like you just see this march towards this crazy vision that Grant has of merging all of these things together, and what you have to kind of understand Blackmagic, and I've never talked to Grant, so I don't know, what his grand scheme is, but the sense that I get sitting on the outside is that you have someone who wants to build an entirely integrated workflow to build films, to build content. And so the idea is that you've got cameras and you've got, audio and you've got editing, color, sound, all those things. And it'd be a lot easier if all of this was integrated together. Because right now, most of the time we do sets, we all get really good at how to make all that, kind of clump that all together. How do we make it all work together? And also, how do we make it more affordable? And I think that he's, kind of slowly cranking down that path. It's a pretty amazing thing that you can only do with a person running a company that is making money, like a lot of money to do it. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and what Alex said about being articulate is really important. You don't want to be the squeaky wheel just. I mean, you want to articulate what you need. Also, I want to point out, I can't speak for Blackmagic, but I'm going to assume. I knew the team of people that read every single comment that came in for Final Cut. They still do. And I remember being at a show once where somebody was complaining that, Apple never listens to us. Ironically, as I'm standing there talking to this person, literally there's two Apple employees who I had been standing there talking with, of course, their badges flipped over, in this little quad of people. And this guy comes in and interrupts with us. And he goes, Apple never listens. And I'm looking at these two employees, and I said, I assure you, they're listening right now. like literally right now.
Right at this moment.
But they read, and probably still do, every comment that comes in. So Alex is right. It pays to participate in the discussion, but be a useful voice in the discussion and not just a cranky geek.
Really think about the tone in which you ask things. I love. There's one of my favorite, or maybe my favorite comedian is Nate Bargatze, and who Chris didn't even know who he was, but you got him and he's pretty funny. Chris, did you see him?
Oh yeah, no.
Oh, I thought you didn't know it so much.
I've been listening to Nate for quite a while, and anyway, he's fantastic.
So funny, but he said that his I always think about this one, weird things. It's not quite related, but I think about this when I write things to companies. He said, he has someone who mows his lawn, and he says it's his wife, and he goes, I love that, we don't have to pay to mow the lawn or to mow the lawn. He goes, I don't quite like the tone that it's mowed in. So anyway, the funny thing about that is that I think about what's your tone? For some reason, I think about Nate every single time I write something to a developer of like, what kind of tone am I having when I'm talking to them about it? Because if you become that guy that's like, and I can be that person. I know that no one will believe this, but I can be very cutting and frustrated and angry and sarcastic and all those things. I know. I know. So I try as best I can. I fail sometimes, but I succeed most of the time of being positive, like, hey, this is really great. Love what you're doing here. And then these are the things that I think would make it better and everything else, but not like, you want them the thing you want to think about is, how do I have someone excited? Like, oh, Chris is sending me a thing. I love looking at Chris's, I love looking at Chris's suggestions because they're great and they make me more excited to work on the product. Or are they, oh, Chris, like that, he is that guy, that's gonna, and so he's like, and then they're like, I'll open that later because I have to do that after lunch, after I've had a little to eat, because it's going to be rough, and so you want to kind of think through that. And I can tell you, as someone who obviously with office hours and as someone who has made products, I definitely, how quickly I open someone's email or look at their comment is directly related to how positive or negative they are during that communication on a general basis, and so it's just something to think about. Next question.
Next one comes in from our friend Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. He says, discuss the DICE Awards live stream for video games. How did they do with this live stream? And he has a link there.
Yeah, it looked like I'm not sure what the specific question is related to this. But this is this is an award ceremony. Let's see here. Let me cut this. Let's see if we can. So here it is. So here you have, it's an award ceremony. I don't know where it is, somewhere in LA, maybe.
Looks like the Beverly Hilton.
It could be the Beverly Hilton. Yeah, it does look like that, doesn't it? And they have
Andrew Dice Clay.
It might have been.
Yeah. You wish.
So, it not I wouldn't call it so there's a lot of playback. There's stage stuff with some pretty standard hard stage lighting. It's a rental stage. It's got standard markers on it. Graphics are okay. This is just I don't know if there's a specific thing like they did something special. To me, it's pretty straightforward. They've got an LED wall behind it, to do that stuff. But yeah, this is it does look like the Beverly Hilton, which is it's kind of like a slightly less expensive place to do these kind of things. So anyway, it's nice. Bandwidth is really expensive there. That's what we think about the Beverly Hilton. I'm like $6,000 for 10 gigs or 10 megs, so anyway, it looks reasonably good. There's a lot of, you can see it doesn't, when you start looking at these things, you start noticing, it's fine. I think that they wanted to make it look rough, but, they just have Steve stands out there, which it's kind of not what I usually see on a show. But I'm sure it's the look that they wanted, is kind of the rough and tumble look there. I am a little bit surprised. I think that why they have 20, wait, what happened there? Hold on.
The stream didn't start on time, obviously.
Well, it said starting and then it jumped to 4 minutes and then it started. That's funny. So they either cut it out. There's all kinds of things going on with that clock. So they have a really long clock. I am not a big fan of leaving long clocks in place.
On the head of your video, too.
Yeah, on the head of the video.
Why did they leave that on the head of the video?
So they do it, I can tell you why. They do it because they want to keep the chat, because they think that the chat is important, and you lose the whole chat if you trim it. So as soon as you trim it, I'm not a big fan of the chat, so I don't trim. I just trim the videos so that it's a nice experience for people who come to watch it later. Yeah, I think that it's kind of and oftentimes we try to think about what that transition is coming out of that countdown clock and into, you can see it with this show, we go and fade to black and then fade out. That way we could cut that off without having something uncomfortable. So, yeah. So there's nothing, I don't know what you're asking, Paul, specifically, but it's a bunch of cameras with, and they've got an encoder. Next question.
Okay. I was just going to ask, we didn't know how well it did is there any way to gauge that? And since streamers, game people are used to watching streaming video all day long,
it has 40,000 views on 18 million subscribers. That return is not great, but it's still 40,000 views. It's 40,000 views since 4 days ago. I don't know what it had live, but that ratio is to put it in perspective. Like our ratio is 20%. 20% of our subscribers watch our show. Like,
And I'm not-
I don't know. So if they had 20%, it would be a million, or
And I'm
nearly
not-
a million. So,
I'm not a gamer,
more
so I'm
than
not
that.
sure where they promoted this show because I didn't hear anything about it.
Well,
until
IGN
Paul
has a pretty good
Hudgens.
IGN has a pretty good vertical. That's games are their vertical. Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks, when producing TV broadcast advertisements, how do you take the calm act and other loudness considerations into account? Is that done in the production process or in the transmission pipeline?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, generally the calm act compliance, which has to do with making sure that commercials have a uniform level from audio level from one commercial to the next commercial to the next commercial when broadcast, has to really be done in the broadcast pipeline, not in the original production pipeline. So you submit the commercials with whatever standard you're working to so that the audio is pretty equal throughout, is equal level throughout the length of the commercial that you're submitting. And then on broadcast, there is hardware that is designed to equalize the level, look ahead and equalize the levels and make sure that all the spots that you have stacked in there for play out are in compliance and all fit within the decibel ratings of that calm act to make them broadcast compliant. So I think it's done at master control or wherever is playing out the commercials. This becomes a lot more problematic when you have local insert commercials. It's tougher to do, I think, to get a commonality. If some commercials are being inserted at your local cable company and some commercials are being inserted at the network and some commercials, who knows, maybe being inserted by your streaming device on your platform. So I'm not sure how they accommodate that with all those different sources of inserting commercials into your live stream.
Yeah, and Linear Acoustics, who is part of the Telos Alliance, has a lot of tools for this. So they kind of normalize all of those things so that they hit the targets that are required. And so they'll bring that audio in through that hardware box and in real time make those adjustments so that everything sounds the same. But obviously, if you are the producer of that commercial, you prefer them not to do more of the work than they needed to. So you try to hit the mark yourself. Mickey said that that people do both. We have a mix specs that we are required to hit in production, and then the network has processing capabilities again, which is the hardware there. So there's the more you can do in production to meet the spec, the less it's going to be taken somewhere else. After that. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida, asked, is there a generative music AI? Think Midjourney for music.
There are, SoundRaw is one of the ones that are there. I think that the Sunu music, and then I think Google has one that I can't think of. I have not found I thought that music would go much faster than it has, and I think that most of it has been very synthy, kind of stuff, and has, is using samples or is trying to generate those things. I do think that that's going to be a big piece of it. There's a new one out that I've seen promoted. I haven't used it, which is, you can kind of sing a song and it will then tie your voice into Tracy Chapman playing something or someone else playing something there. So it makes it sound like you're singing that song. But it's using a little bit of you and a little bit of that and a little bit of AI to kind of blend those together as kind of a deep fake for the song. So those are some of the things that are happening there, but I haven't seen a lot of really good generative stuff. I will tell you one to watch is actually Logic. I was watching a demo of Logic, and I don't think they do it with everything, but it's got this kind of band thing that happens, and one of them is a drum. This drum system that Apple has in it will just look at the tracks that you're running and just give you a drum track. And it's kind of amazing to watch. And it actually has little graphics of the drums so you can see them playing while you're doing it. And it's not, it's not going to win any Grammys, but it is if you just needed a drums fill or just drum backing, it does a pretty good job of making it work. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was wondering if the model has changed now that we've seen Sora come out, where they're using a time-constrained sampling by sampling video to generate these text to video AI pieces these days. If they're training it with all the music out there, let's say, in the world. And they're instead applying this new time-related model rather than looking at just what note follows what note, but what note follows what note in what period of time.
Yeah.
So to get the meter correct and to be able to generate something that has a little more style to it based on the request for, in reggae style or.
I mean, the one that I find the most interesting right now is it taking apart songs. And so Moises, I've talked about before.
In other words, separating each instrument into its own channel. So is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
my daughter, this is how she learns songs. Is she takes Moises, and I got to tell you, my credit card, the date had to be refreshed, and I hadn't done that. I put that off a little bit, and I started getting. She just send me stills of my Moises isn't working like every day because she uses it all day. And so what she does is she takes the song and uploads it to Moises. Moises will then separate it out. So it'll give you guitar, bass, drums, vocals, keyboard, that type of thing. And it'll separate it all into the individual tracks. And then you can move those tracks up and down. And it's kind of scary. I mean, because it sounds like, for instance, the voice is just sitting in an open echo, in a chamber with just the reverb, and it doesn't sound like anything's over top of it. It just separates it out really nicely. It's kind of amazing. The reason she uses it, of course, is that she wants to learn drums or bass or guitar with it. And the advantage is you can isolate it and play with that instrument, or you can isolate it, or you can pull it out and play that instrument instead. And what's incredible, when I just felt like we were in the future, is, I got her an electronic drum set, and it has Bluetooth audio in and it's headset to her, but it's got Bluetooth audio in from the phone. So she takes the drums and she can play with the drums while she's learning something. Like, I think one of her bands was playing Volcano Girls from Veruca Salt. So it was evidently a pretty complicated set of drums in that area. And so but she could take the drums and only play with those drums and make sure she gets it right. And then she can take the drums out and hear the rest of the song and play with it. And what happens is that the Bluetooth from Moises goes into the electronic drum set, and then she can mix her drums into that music, and that's what she's hearing while she's playing. The future. That's all I got to say. So it's kind of incredible to watch, and it's incredible to watch someone who's only played drums for 4 months or 5 months, playing in a concert. It's pretty crazy. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Courtney.
I was just going to ask. That seems to be that's using AI to
it's the other direction.
But for generative AI, are they generating? I haven't heard a lot of music that's done with generative AI. Are they generating just a single? You said like a little synth track or something, so it's a single voice doing a melody. Have they done arrangement? Does it create arrangements?
It's done arrangement. It's just that it hasn't been. It's not something I would listen to for a long period of time. So yeah, so that's. I mean, I've talked to. I think there's some that people. I think Suno. I think someone told me that they were using that as like background music. That's SUNO AI, I think, is the one that I was told people have been using for, like, they'll use it to generate some stuff they just want in the background. Next question.
All right, coming in from Mathieu Lecomte in Oakland. He says, building a portable live stream case connecting a Mac Mini to ATEM 2 ME using multiview as a monitor. Can I set the mini display prefs permanently at ATEM resolution so it boots to display in multiview?
Go ahead, Chris.
I think the Mini's going to do that anyway. That's not the hard thing. What I would worry about, and I'll tell you from experience, I used to do a lot of when I bought my Mac Mini that I used for Zoom, I had no monitor attached to it, and I would just use Apple Remote Desktop to open up a window to it so I could use it. And it started to get, I was too smart for my own good. I was like, that works, but there's problems with doing that. You're probably going to want a dedicated monitor for that computer. There's a lot of advantages to that, But you shouldn't, I don't think you're going to have any problem if you just plug it into the mini or to your ATEM and have it be one of the inputs on your switcher. But you gotta have a place where you can glance and see that all that stuff is working right. And be careful.
Yeah, you just probably, to do this, you first of all need to get your ATEM 2ME set up right, and then save your settings. Save the startup state of the mixer or your ATEM, if you have an ATEM Mini or ATEM 2ME, I guess. And save your startup state. And then what you want to do is when you boot the system up, start the ATEM first so that it's up and stable and finished and ready, and then start the Mac Mini so that when it exchanges EDID, it'll talk to the ATEM and the ATEM will say, here's what I need, and the Mac Mini will then set itself to 1080p as its output since it talked with the EDID to the ATEM.
And I think the only thing there is that I think we're handling. I guess he said that HDMI directly into the 2ME, but I don't know where HDMI goes directly into a 2ME because I thought 2ME is all SDI. So I don't quite understand that. So I didn't know that there are some versions of the 2ME that have HDMI input, but I don't know which one he's using. Matthew, you can jump into the chat if you want to there. But I think that in general, the handshake will work, and it'll be it depends on what family of 2MEs. So if you have it directly into it, I will admit a lot of times we've had quirky. I think this is what Matthew has been pointing out is that the 2ME HDMI direct into the older 2MEs is we found to be a little quirky. So it was a little quirky, and oftentimes we had to put some kind of frame correction in front of it. So it was pretty often in the older 2MEs, if that's what you have there, we would need to put in a decimator or a Terranex to get it to see it all the time. Like sometimes it would see it, and sometimes it wouldn't. And so we couldn't quite figure that out if you're using an older one. If you're using a newer one, it should just make that correction if there's an HDMI input there. But the older ones had trouble with this, and we had to put some kind of frame correction in to get it to work. And typically it was a decimator or either a decimator or a Terranex. Next question.
Next one comes in from Eric Hers in Hartford, Connecticut. Thoughts about 10 millisecond glass-to-glass streaming via Kyber? And here's a link.
Yeah, so Kyber talks about 10 milliseconds glass to glass, but my question is from where to where? So I need to know. There is if you're going over fiber, it's 42 milliseconds from San Francisco to New York. So that's a physics problem. Like you can do 10 milliseconds to in the building or what's there. But I think that but at 10 milliseconds, where are you trying to get to get that kind of frame rate? So I looked at it and I didn't see them really addressing that very well. So if I'm trying to get to something that is, and this is for gameplay and so on and so forth, and if you are talking about playing games, and for instance, it automatically pushes you to the Amazon cloud that's near you to deliver that game, you possibly could get those kinds of that kind of thing. But remember that you now have to have a really good internet connection to maintain that without having any kind of breakup at all. It looks good for something in the building, something that's close to the building. Because if I have to connect to Oregon, my throw to Oregon is probably less than 20 milliseconds, maybe 15 milliseconds, something like that. LA is 17 milliseconds from San Francisco, and so that would be really fast to be a frame. So that could work if it was locally instanced. But if you have to go across the country around the world, it's not going to be as fast. But for delivering games and some production tools, and if you're in a cloud that's going to put it on the edge near you, it's pretty impressive. So we'd have to test it though. But it sounds impressive. Next question.
Coming in from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas, says, discuss the Samsung Bluetooth technology that allows one device to broadcast an audio stream to an unlimited number of speakers and headphones. Here's a link there.
Unlimited is a big word. Really big word. So like, I don't know. I don't like, when someone says unlimited, I always think of Star Wars where, he says, there's not enough money or whatever. And she says, there's more than you can imagine. He's like, I can imagine a lot. And so anyway, unlimited is a big word. So we'd have to see how many that actually means. There are some interesting opportunities there. One of the things that this could be useful for, are if you've ever seen the quiet discos or the quiet dance stuff where they distribute out and they're using radio. Jeremy Horn, who's in our group, Jeremy has a whole setup for this, and it's got these headphones in it, but they use RF to get to those headphones so that everyone's getting the same signal at the same time. It's pretty cool. So being able to do it for Bluetooth would be kind of cool. I just don't know what the range would be and how you would do that and why you would do that. I also noticed in the article that they're supporting 360 audio, which they are not calling Atmos because Samsung's too cheap to use Atmos. Everything that Samsung does is like, how do we not pay Dolby? So HDR 10 Plus is we're too cheap for Vision. so anyway, Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was wondering. I guess Bluetooth is normally a peer-to-peer type communications. And if they do a broadcast mode to it where it doesn't do any error correction or it doesn't do any acknowledgement back from the devices that are paired other than the initial pairing, then it can do it probably with a common latency amongst all. But I don't know if it'd be unlimited. It also would depend on the power of your Bluetooth transmitter. And these days, if your transmitter's inside a tablet or inside a phone or something like that, the antennas are inside that device and they don't have very good communication. So a lot of times they're not going to have enough output, since they're running on batteries a lot of times, to hit a broad area of people. Like if you're trying to transmit to a whole arena full of people who are listening on their earbuds, that might be a problem if you're talking unlimited.
I mean, I think that there are some interesting, there are some services that do provide the music. And I know Leah was talking about one. It's like a Sennheiser product that you can broadcast to. It's using a specific system. And so that you can, I think that Auracast is what David Brady is posting here. But it is, there are some other folks that are putting stuff together so that you can put headphones on. There's two advantages at a concert for headphones. One is it can be louder, but with higher fidelity. When you put something in to block the audio, you're getting it tends to be a little bit more muffled than even with good ones. It's not the same as having your ears open. And also surround is really a subjective thing when it comes to concert audio.
Also, would eliminate the echo in the venue.
Yeah.
So you have a more direct, a cleaner, drier sound than you would listening just over the speakers.
Yeah.
And maybe they have a Bluetooth repeater that's in there that the person broadcasting hits the repeater, and the repeater has the high power that hits the whole arena with. So that's one way they could do it.
Next question.
Next question comes in from Jeff Valey in Henderson, Texas. Please discuss the pros and cons of using Companion natively in StreamDeck versus the Companion plugin.
I actually don't know the answer to that, other than what I will say is that if you really want to take full power of Companion, you would use it natively in the StreamDeck. You're going to have a lot more stability. You're going to have a lot more. It's going to work better. I think that you're going to find that it's a little bit more limited. The advantage of working as a plugin my guess is that you're going to be able to use the native StreamDeck stuff as well as the Companion stuff. So Mickey says that. Mickey uses the Companion plugin. He says, I have had Companion crash, but not the native StreamDeck application. So I run as much as I can natively on the StreamDeck and only run what I need on Companion. So there's this. That's Mickey's solution there. Next question.
Next one comes in from Danny Grizzle. Great name, in Longview, Texas. How do you sustain momentum? I'm torn between the turn and burn and getting swamped in unbudgeted administration time, accumulations of production debris, data recovery, media wrapping up, and new jobs not done until the paperwork is done tasks.
Yeah, it's finding other people to help. It's really a big deal. It's important. I think that you want to always look at I almost always will try to find other people to work with on everything, whether it's a partnership, whether I'm bringing in students, whether I'm, doing something where I'm training people. I very, very quickly move to, I can't do this by myself. It's amazing how little one person can get done. It's just truly amazing, like how inefficient one person can be by yourself, because, it's kind of like the way I think of it. It's kind of like all the lines that you see. If there's only one line, it only takes one slow customer to jack that whole line up. Whereas you have multiple lines of people that you're working with, you can get caught up in something, or somebody else can get caught up in something, and someone else is still working. So yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're hiring and paying production crew, one thing I learned very early on is to offload the payroll to a second service. I used ADP and Paychex and a number of them over the years to handle payroll, because they handle a collection of payroll taxes and paying your payroll taxes, which is something you don't want to ever get behind on because you're legally liable for that stuff. And if you hand that over, that eliminates a lot of the production coordination and payment and after the production problems, and make sure that people get paid on time and that all your taxes are submitted. And there are other services you can use for invoicing and collection as well. So hand it off to, and there's plenty of software available for handling this stuff that helps coordinate it, takes care of it on a regular basis. So make sure your software and your outside services are in line. And then I found that I could run an office myself after I had to lay off my office manager for doing a lot of this stuff by just using a lot of those software tools and separate services.
Next question.
Coming in from Edward R. Ruiz in Chicago, he says, in what level of production is the Blackmagic comms built into the 2ME Constellation ideal for? What gear is needed for each crew member to connect to them, into the 2ME?
I love Blackmagic. I have a lot of their products. I use a lot of their products. I have never successfully used the comms through the Constellation. so that's like, I guess I've had a wide variety of problems with the comms in the system. I've spent time with Blackmagic talking about it. I have tried to figure it out, and we've just, through the fiber backs, through the regular cameras, through everything else, we've just lost so much time thinking that we could figure it out and it was just us, but I don't think it is. I think that they just really, this is, comms is complicated and mix minus is complicated, and, all those things are complicated. And I think that they haven't, it's an area that I think they should figure out, but it's an area that I don't think that they have figured out. Next question.
Comes in from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. He says, will office hours have sponsors in the future? Alex?
We're looking at it. We usually talk about these kind of questions a little bit more in detail when we on Sunday. So if you ask this question on Sunday, we might answer it in more detail. But we're definitely looking at it, especially around events. But I think the thing we're constantly trying to manage is really making sure that people don't feel like we're, it's affecting our show. So that's the thing that we're always kind of careful of. So we're trying to figure out a way to set that up in a way that we give someone who supports what we're doing something, and then but we also keep what we have. So we're still figuring that out, and that's why it's been so delayed. Coming up next, we'll be talking about shooting and building 3D models for the Apple Vision. So stay tuned for that. And a couple quick announcements here. Tomorrow we have Matthew Bertner. He is a UVA professor and takes sound to a whole new level. And so he's going to be talking. He's going to be joining us here. We're really excited to have him to talk about his approach to sound as a composer, a sound artist, and acoustician. I should have read that before I said it. Anyway, Thursday, of course, we're going to have Q&A. Friday, we're going to talk about VLANs. So we got a bunch of great experts. So here's the thing. when we start having like a thing about VLANs, it's not just a day that you can talk about VLANs. It means that the first hour is going to have a bunch of folks that are, and even in the second hour, if you know that you can that can ask questions. So so it's a great time to come and ask your tech questions. Saturday is Q&A and Sunday is introspection. Sunday is a good day to ask the questions that Andy just asked about more internal stuff. We'll talk about that in more detail and in a more relaxed state. So definitely come in on Sunday to ask those questions about office hours specifically. Saturday is usually where we see a lot of new technologies kind of rolling out and us figuring things out and people training and working on it. It's a great, both of those days are really a lot of fun. So definitely join us. Welcome back to our second hour, and we will be answering your questions relatively quickly so that we can, and then we'll come back to pieces of it if we haven't gotten to all of those things. But one of the things that we wanted to cover was a little bit of one of the things we wanted to cover is how to build models for the Apple Vision, and really just how to build USDZ models and how to build models with the phone. There's a lot of tools in there that have become very, very effective. And I think that, for a lot of us who have been doing some version of photogrammetry or LIDAR for the last 20 or 30 years, it's just never been better. Like, I think that we constantly are thinking, you have no idea, what it used to be like to make this all happen. And so I thought it'd be worth answering it. And, a lot of this will be driven by your questions. I'm going to show a couple things that I think are useful. But a lot of them will be driven by your questions as far as how that goes. What generally happens here, and I'll show you kind of a base version of this here. I'm going to get this thing paired up here. Let me see. Is that, the new phones, of course, the new Apple phones, and Google, ironically, was the first one to do this. So they put LIDAR into some of their phones. The funny thing is Google did not put LIDAR into some of their phones. They supported it with Google. And then they had Chinese phones that we had to bring in that would have LIDAR built into them. So they were thinking ahead and then decided not to do it. It's very battery intensive. And so, let me pull this up here. So I'm going to show you, basically how this works. And I make sure I can grab this here. Hold on. Sorry here. I got this. So, yep, there we go. So what you're going to see here is I'm going to, I brought over a camera to capture here a little bit. So I just want to show you what this kind of looks like here. So let me cut to this. So here you see this camera. This is the 950 that I have floating. It's usually in my wall of depreciation. And what you'll see here is that I can do a LIDAR. I have room, photo. Photo is going to use photogrammetry. This is using the app called Polycam. I'm going to move this T over somewhere that I hopefully won't spill. And all right, so anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit start, and what you're going to see, and I'm not going to do a whole thing here, but you'll see it start to build, and you can see whatever it can see within about 25 feet. It's starting to build here. So now you're going to see it start to work, and you can see what it grabbed here. So it grabbed a little bit of the back wall. So you can see, as it starting to show you that. So what you can see is these green areas here. This is where my camera was. So it's looking at where the camera was here. And as I move it around, this block here is the, and we'll show you a couple more higher res versions of this in a second. But this block here is, that's the camera. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit process. And this will take you can see it kind of, let's see here. See, it's kind of going through those and figuring those bits and pieces out here. And so while that happens, so what it's doing is it's using a mixture of the LIDAR as well as the photos. So it's taking the photos and it's mixing those together to build the model. There it is. So here's a rough version of this model. Now we did that very quickly, so it's not perfect. You can see some of the tearing, tearing here that happens. And if I had spent more time on it, it would definitely look better. But as a quick example of what you can do, and again, if I spent a little more time, I'd probably get a little more fidelity out of it. But you can see that this is you're starting to grab that 3D model. And what's interesting is that usually because it's using LIDAR, the scale is typically very, very good. And so even if you're going to refine this model later, you may find that it's worth doing. So the interesting thing there is that, when you want to measure things to build things out, a lot of times I shoot things like this. I don't know if I have it here on this. Let's see if I can find one for you. Let's see. This was and you can go the other way too. So for instance, I walked into a little empty studio and I, got this. This is just the studio that happened to be that we were looking at possibly doing some shoots in, and I can go in here and take a look at it. And so I just waved around. This took about, and again, not the cleanest thing, but and this is the one problem you get into with things that are repeating down here, is that it misguided this process. And this is what you get with kind of the phone in that area. But you can, again, it's the relatively good scale, and you can throw this in and it will come into your, I don't have a way to really show the vision as well as I'd like to, but it will come in at full res, at full height. So you can send someone something and they will, be able to jump literally into it, and take a look at it. And so when I'm looking at spaces, et cetera, that we're trying to kind of figure out. Now, the other side of this, and I don't have, let's see if I can show it. So anytime I'm looking at a space, oftentimes I'm kind of using this to grab onto, a lot of times it's like, I was looking at this space here. Let's see if I can, and you can see this was a roll up door. If I look around, so this is a space that I want to show it to other people in the company. I can very quickly just wander through and grab this. And if you are in the Apple, again, if you're in the Apple Vision, you're able to actually throw those in. These are just USDZ files. That are being generated from this process. And so that's one way to grab these. Let me see if I can find let's see her. Let's see here. I just want to see if I can. This is another example here. Let me see if I can pop this up here. So here is and I'll show you more of this in a second. This is a model that it was shot, and so this is from Cambodia. This is actually part of Bayon Temple, and so you can kind of see. Now I've made, this is in Reality Composer here, but you can see that this is, a lot of scale, a lot of detail here. And now the way this was captured is totally with photogrammetry. So this is not done with, any kind of LIDAR. We did shoot some LIDAR there. I'll show you what the pictures look like here in a second. But this is photogrammetry is basically starting to, use photos to figure a lot of these bits and pieces out. And what happens is that how the two of them go together is that you have photogrammetry, which is unstructured light. It's just a lot of pixels. And what it has to do is if it looks at an object, it's going to look at how things are. It's basically looking at all the points it can find that have some originality to them. So it might look in my face, it might look at edges of my nose and my mouth and other things like this, and it'll grab onto all these little details. It will then try to match those points on other photos, and then it will start to, once it correlates those points, it can figure out where the cameras were and what their focal length was and what the lens distortion was, and all those things can be figured out. And then it can map that back, and make that work. And so it then can build the 3D model. And so the problem with unstructured light photogrammetry is that it can have accuracy. It obviously has scale issues, but it can also have accuracy issues, in that process. And so you have to be kind of careful of that. But the advantage of it is it's infinite resolution. So the better the camera is, the more data you're going to get. And so, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was wondering how if you're using photogrammetry and not using LIDAR, and with LIDAR, it determines distances by time of flight of the laser from the source from your phone to the object and back. But with photogrammetry, you don't really know. It has to calculate the size of the object and the distance of the object from the camera, just using, I guess, determining where the horizon is or how high the camera is off the ground.
It's really vanishing points. So it's
vanishing points. So
yeah,
it looks for the vanishing point and then calculates the size, because it doesn't know if it was a 2-inch high little head that you were photographing with a macro lens, or
exactly.
if it's 10 feet tall and you're 12 feet away from it.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I'm trying to find a photo here here it is. So to give you a sense of what that looked like, this was part of a larger thing. I happen to have I needed to spend a couple weeks in Angkor Wat, Cambodia, and so and in that time I was managing a project but not doing a lot of it. So I was in meetings, all day on site, but I was not having to do anything else. And so this is what happens when you leave me with nothing to do for hours a day. Is I started to do this, and so this is part of Bayon Temple, and this is using photogrammetry. And so so if you look at this, all of this here, all the way down to the ropes, is all geometry. So if I click on here, so you can imagine standing here, but this isn't a photograph. You can still see some of the pixelation here, but you can see that there's a lot of data that was captured, here to make this work. This is actually all of this data in here. That's actually 3D. That's actually a highlight of 3D. This isn't this isn't something else. Here's some other pieces. No, this is all the photos I took. So that's what. So I got up there and in this case I got up almost everybody will go to a different temple in the morning because there's a sunrise that everyone wants to see, and that means that this temple is less managed. And so I was able to go over early and took a couple hundred photos. You can see here, and what I'm looking at is, if you think about the objects, I'm trying to cover them. So if there's an object, if you think about an object like this, geometry like this, I'm trying to take pictures that grab onto different points from this angle and then from this angle. And I want there to be a lot of overlap between those because I want them to be able to see each other. They have to see points in each other's field of view so that they can correlate the two cameras together. And so here there's where you can see all the cameras kind of a lot, looking at all of those bits and pieces. Here you can see another angle. Here's another shot here. So all of this here is 3D geometry. That you can see here. So that's all me just kind of working my way from one side to the other. And so the project I'm on right now is trying to put somebody right here, inside of the headset. So you can imagine being able to stand here and look around and even walk around. And so that's what we're kind of working on. So I'm putting this together as kind of a, R&D project. I have been for a while. So anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question. When you're doing something like that and it's creating a 3D mesh and then it's applying the bitmaps from the individual photographs over that mesh, does it apply different bitmaps based on your point of view? In other words, if it's lit with a hard light from the right, so some of the stuff is in shadow, if you move your camera position after it generates your 3D model, if you move your camera position to the shady side, will it use the shady side bitmap instead of a common bitmap?
Well,
to map mapped over that 3D geometry? Yeah,
it's a great question. So the thing about it is, what you're trying to do is you are trying to try to take it all at the same time. So if you're taking objects, you try to light them in a studio. So a lot of times for objects, the one thing that I'll try to get into in a minute is the Apple stuff. But if you're trying to take objects, you want the objects to be as evenly lit as possible. So days
flat
that
light is better than harsh.
Yeah, you definitely want flat light because there's a couple of advantages to it. So a big cloudy day is great, and I didn't get that all here. I got a little bit of that. So oftentimes, if I can do it fast enough, and I feel like I can cover the space enough, like that was like this scene here. I took all of those within probably a 20 or 30 minute thing. And a lot of times you're crouching down and going up and crouching down and moving around. And I know I can tell you that after let's see, this one, because what I was doing here to shoot this one as an example is I had a camera that was, shooting like this, and then I would shoot this way and this way. So I'd have 3 shots. So one straightforward, one at 45, one at 45. And then I would also shoot down and up. So I'd shoot those from that position, but I'd also stand up higher and go down lower and do the same thing. And then I would move about a meter down and do the same thing again, all the way. And so I shot, so then I'm hitting every surface from every angle, but I had to do it relatively quickly. I could not walk normally for days after doing this one.
You
wall.
didn't have a strobe or anything on the camera itself to illuminate.
No, strobes actually make it harder because
I
you're going to change the light from the position of the camera all the time.
Will always be from the position of the camera, right?
Yeah, so I don't
flat,
and that's going to be but that's going to create all kinds of shadows. It actually makes it because you want the pixels to look the same, between things. And so the what I would do here the next time, if I ever get to go again, is I build tracks. I designed something for this wall specifically, but build tracks here. And what I would do is build a rig that had probably a camera up high, camera middle, camera here, that swung on a bar so that I could just move them around and fire them, and then I could do this. What took here maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes would take 5 or 10 minutes, and it would also be better. I'd have way more data. And so anyway, so this is not using the phone, but you can. The advantage now is that you can use the phone, so you can take lots of photos of a given object and throw those into photogrammetry. This was the models you saw there were Metashape, so they're not using some crazy app. That's just a relatively inexpensive subscription to use those. And so that's what I use to model those. But there's a lot of things again, Polycam, which I just showed you there. Apple makes its own product. I'm just going to grab it in a second. But a lot of them will give you different levels of guidance on what to shoot and how to shoot it. I'm just trying to see if I can find the one that I was going to show here. But these will, they'll give you, let's see if I can, I don't know why hold on.
Well, you're
Somehow
looking
I
at
ended
that.
up in 2 different accounts. Yeah, go ahead.
Does it use the phone's GPS to store the phone's relative position from photograph to photograph and take that into consideration?
Not really. So
it just uses the angle, tracing the commonality between the different photos to determine the movement of the phone. Yeah.
The problem really is that it's not accurate enough to the challenge is that GPS isn't accurate enough to really grab that information. So like here is, let me see if I can, for some reason this wasn't on my other phone.
AirDrop.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just grabbed the phone that it was on here.
Well, the new DJI drones have this 3D capability in for storing and repeating the path of the drone. I just wondered how useful that would be in doing photogrammetry.
It does, but it's correcting it. The drone is giving it some data to help it, but to get pixel for pixel, the problem is GPS just isn't accurate enough to give you pixel. GPS is plus or minus. They say 10 meters, but it's really like 3 meters. So like 3 meter plus or minus on most GPS data. And then if you use Bluetooth LE, you can get down to 1 meter, distances. And then you have to start using ultra wideband or other things to get down to 6 to 8 inches or 8 to 10 inches or 8 to 10 centimeters technically. So the problem is that you need to match things to build models, you need sub-pixel accuracy, which is sub-millimeter accuracy to make it useful at all. But the GPS and all those other things can help you know that this group of photos it belongs together, and that can help. Here's let me see if I can get this. This is another example of an object that I shot here. So this is my ATEM switcher. I'm working on building a model of it. Oh, sorry. No, there we go. Nope, wrong one. So this is the ATEM switcher that I shot here. So and I'm working on building a 3D model of the ATEM switcher, mostly so I can build apparatuses for it so that I can, for my desk. And so, you can see that it had a little bit of extra here because that's what it was sitting on. Now, what I was sitting this on to shoot this, so I get multiple angles because I wanted to get underneath it, is, let's see here.
And if you're going to 3D print something, you're going to need accuracy to within, a tenth of a millimeter. Is it going to be that accurate?
Yeah. So, anyway, so this is what's called a triad orbit stand, and the reason that's useful is because the legs open up at the bottom like that, so they stay away from everything. And I use this for 360 because it's really, I don't want to paint out the legs, and so it's really heavy. And then what I did is it's got this little piece that pops out. And I did is I ordered on Amazon, I ordered a, let me see if I cover my eyes here. I ordered a cheese plate, like a little cheese plate, and then I just ordered some little like rubber dots on it like that. And the reason that that's useful for me is so that I can set objects at a certain height that I want to have it at, and then I can get under them. So this allows me to kind of set them up. And so I've used them either some diffuse lighting or on a cloudy day in my living room, taking those photos. And that one was shot on a cloudy day to make that actually happen. But I think that there are a lot of these objects that are, when you think about those, this is not going to replace building really refined models that from scratch that can articulate. But when you're talking about want to send something, I can tell you that when we were trying to figure out what office we wanted to look at or sets that we want to shoot in, being able to wave a camera around, wave your phone around and be able to have a set, send it back to people to look at helps. Helps a lot. Again, it's not the replacement for LIDAR, but it's good. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
All righty then. Let's see. From Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany, he says, I captured a sculpture with Polycam very successfully. Now I have 100 megabyte file. How to embed this into a website for visitors of the museum?
Yeah. So the next step for you is what we call decimation. So what you're going to need to look at, and I think that Polycam will do some of that decimation for you. So you can tell it, hey, I want to make it a medium res, low res, that type of thing. So that's one way to handle it. And you do have some limitations. So I have found Chris Fritchie put up a 550 meg file that he had built, and it does import into the Vision Pro, but it's clunky. It doesn't too much data. And to text someone, to send it to a phone or to open it up in a phone on the Apple phone is, I think, 50 megs. Is the limit. And so what you need to do is you need to figure out how you're going to decimate it to reduce the complexity of it in a smart way. The best solution that I have found is ZBrush. So ZBrush is the solution that I've used to do this decimation. I find that it does a really excellent job at the trick. The trick with decimation is, where do you decimate? So if you think about a surface like this, and then it goes like this, and then it might go up like this. What you want to do is you want to oftentimes get rid of a bunch of the geometry here and a bunch of the geometry here and here, but you got to keep these edges, all these little details that are there, and little hiccups. And so it has to be smart about how it does that. And but making those decisions, the software that we used for Star Wars was Rainbow Geomagic. It's still around, but it's like $20,000. But it still does some of that smart decimation, those smart decimation tools. But I would look at ZBrush as the best one. And the other thing that ZBrush has is lots of cleanup tools. You can do you can paint problems out and make those work. And then you can also use that to lower some of the texture files and so on and so forth to make that happen. So I would look at ZBrush for that smart decimation to get it down to the resolution that you want it to actually work at. Next question.
Next one comes in from our friend Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. He says, how do you save your 3D models offline so that they don't count against your online storage limit, especially with Matterport, Polycam, Scaniverse, and others? Kind of relates to the last answer too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Sketchfab, I think, is where I keep a lot of my files. Let's see if I can find it for you here. But it is, and I don't, there may be a limit. I don't know if I haven't put enough up there. I keep them all on a hard drive. so I don't keep them in the cloud that often. And I'm usually sending them to people directly. So it's a little bit different for me as to the, hold on, let me see if I can find these for you here. let's see here. Just gonna try to. Oh, Sketchfab's not letting me in. So but Sketchfab is a good one to look at there. And there are a couple of different places that you can look to. So Sketchfab will hold these models for you. By the way, if you're looking for examples or you want to be inspired, let me make sure I got this right. Let's see. Yeah, this is a great one to look at if you are trying to, or if you want to be inspired by what's possible. Let me pull this out. Here is. Have I told you today how much I love spaces? Oh no. All right, so so let me show you this. So this is, and a lot of these are captured this way. So so for instance, I'm pretty sure like photogrammetry, this is probably captured with someone's phone. Oops, I don't want to download it. Hold on, let me see if I can. Maybe it won't. I have to admit, I've only used this inside of my headset. This is designed for. This is actually designed for to use with your Vision Pro. So this is so you can see all these objects. So some of them are modeled, some of them are captured here. So you can see these different. But if you want to look for things, and you can see some of these. So for instance, let me take a look at here. I just want to make sure it's not asking for any passwords or anything weird here. Let's see. I'm going to download. Let's see if this. Just want to see. And all of the ones on Beautiful Things XYZ are, they are all available on as USDZs, and so you can bring them in. So here you can see this is and this one actually looks modeled. It looks like someone built a 3D model of it, so you can see these things here. But I will say, and one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this a little bit, or for us to continue to talk about USDZ, is especially with the headsets, with the AR, with a lot of the things that are happening here. If you have contacts with folks for companies that have objects, it's pretty big. It's becoming a pretty big model thing. Like I can tell you, for buying stuff in my house, Amazon includes models for furniture and stuff like that inside of it. Inside of it, it says, "Do you want to see this and apply? Do you want to put this in your scene?" The chances of me buying furniture at this point, or something for my house that I can't preview in it through Amazon or some other service, but like when I'm buying little shelves or something like that, or I'm trying to figure something out to buy, chances of me buying something that doesn't generate that 3D model is almost zero. Like I need to know what it looks like. I'm not going to spend money on it or time or to put it together if I can't figure out. So my Adirondack chairs, I have a fan, I've got some shelves, I've got all of these other things that I needed. And I want to see exactly what they look like in my space. And I'm getting used to just, if I don't have that, I'll go to something that I do have that for. And so I think that there is a have and have nots of having the models or not having the models. That's going to be a big deal for people who are making these things. It's going to get more and more important, especially on the higher end. Go ahead, Courtney.
I was wondering, there's a big 3D library that Windows has. I know Apple is very stingy with its going outside the garden. Is there any way to import those objects from the source of 3D models, like this one in the beating?
Yeah,
part?
The ones with animation are a little bit harder to import, but I don't know is that a GLB? Are they GLB?
Well,
files?
I went up to see to try and export this. I'm an export image now. The only things that you can do is export. The only exports over here are basically flat images, not 3D.
Because it's got some
PNG.
animation stuff built into it. I mean, when we talk about walled garden here, I mean, the reality is Apple's using an open format. So USD is an open format. USDZ has been totally published as well. So Apple may not be using what Microsoft uses, but Microsoft got in early, and USDZ is a far more modern architecture than the other options. And so if someone's using an older option, then that's fine. But USDZ and USD is going to be the file format for quite some time for the visual effects world. And USDZ is simply zipping that up. So I think Apple did carefully not go down the path of something that's proprietary.
So that's universal scene description. And Can it deal with OBJ files and other 3D
Well, you convert
object
them.
files?
You can. So Reality Converter, which you can get from Apple, will convert OBJ and a lot of other things to it. The one that is the best to like really do conversions and figure stuff out is Substance. That's Adobe's product that they bought from Algorithmic. But yeah, Substance is the way to. It's also a great way to texture stuff, and we'll see if we can get Sebastian or someone else from Substance on to talk about it in specifics. So expect that somewhere in the near future, because we're going to keep on talking about this on Tuesdays, because it is such a big business right now. And it's about to become. I mean, there's just so much growth available in this area right now. Everything from, because we have to remember that all these objects. So as an example, I downloaded that Hasselblad, and
there's Thingiverse. There's a huge
Thingiverse. Exactly.
3D objects available for free on the web. That you
can
exactly. purchase as well. Yeah.
The thing that if I grab onto this and I move over, let's see, let me grab this. So I just opened up Keynote. We have to remember we're talking about it as it relates to the Apple Vision, but it doesn't need to be. So this is. And we've talked about this in the past, so I'm not going to spend too much time belaboring it. But I'm sitting here. This is in Keynote, and I can, rotate this object around. So even just for, I want to talk about my product, in this environment, I can now, I can leave this for the person who opens the presentation to do that. But I can also, but again, and this object's going to come in real time into Apple Vision Pro. But I can also use it here. And because the USDZ is an open format and there's so much that's being produced in it, I think you're going to see a lot more coming out in that area. And I know you can do some of the 3D stuff in PowerPoint as well. It just never really took off. And maybe it won't here. We'll see.
But in the Vision Pro, then you'd bring that 3D object in and drop it in your environment, the 3D environment that the Vision Pro has mapped. In other words, like you want to put it on the table.
Yeah, with Vision Pro, if I open a model in Vision Pro, in fact, what's crazy is you can share the models back and forth while you're in Vision Pro. So, for instance, I spent like an hour, in FaceTime with someone else on Vision Pro, and we're sending models back and forth. Like, here, let me show you this model, and that model pops up into my desk. In fact, I'm now having to have an empty desk that I can just go over and look at with Vision Pro when someone sends a model over. Like, I can put it on this desk. So I can see what's.
That would kill me, having to clear off clutter for the case of imaginary objects.
We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but I really do, and I know what I'm saying sounds crazy right now, but I kind of feel like at that moment in Live, Die, and Repeat, where it says, what I'm saying right now might sound crazy, but as I keep on talking, it'll make more sense. And in the sense that it is, I really do think that we're on our way to people having rooms that are largely empty. So like an empty room that's 15 by 15 for these kinds of things is going to be really valuable, because you're going to want to be able to walk into things and do things. Like, for instance, one of the things that we created, if you think about that, the Anchor Watt stuff that I showed there, we've also done stuff with, Shona Sculpture, where we make the Shona Sculpture bigger than it was, but you can kind of wander through. And you can have whole museums, museums that you can wander through. Now, we did that with motion capture and Samsung Gear, headsets 8 years ago now. So those, and it was a great experience. We're working on doing this again in this experience so imagine being able to do the King Tut Museum, but the exhibit, but being able to walk through it, in a space. And you could jump to it in some virtual way, but it'd be really cool if you could walk around in it and, get all the information, have someone talking to you, do all the things that you would have in a museum thing, but see it right in front of you.
Here's a great new market for the Vision Pro, is for real estate agents. They no longer have to stage houses that are empty. For clients. They could, staging is where you bring in a bunch of phony furniture and make it look like a lived-in house. They could just do all your staging, add all the furniture in the headset, and then just put the headset on the client when they do a walkthrough, and they can look at the house.
You can ask the client what they like. Like there's already, and they're already doing this. So Zillow and Wayfair and a couple others are already trying to do this, where it's really rough and does not look good. But it's like, show us your house and we can show you what it would look like if you put this kind of furniture in. So you can say,
I put your gigas in this house. Yeah. Right.
So you could, so you could, and being able to say, well, I really want a modern house. What would this look like? What would this house look like with modern furniture? Boom. What would this house look like with more Ethan Allen? Boom. Like whatever that would, I don't know how you'd mix the two of those together, but it could be possible. Yeah, exactly. I want it to look like I live, the great thing about living in Africa is there's so much art that you get in Africa that isn't nearly as expensive as it is here, but it looks amazing. And so make it look like a Zimbabwean, mansion or whatever. You'd have all the sculpture and artwork and everything else on the walls. It'd be really fun.
Yeah, that would pay for those expensive headsets in just a few visits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's go ahead and go jump into the next question.
Okay, from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Galisto, New Mexico. He says, I have started moving 3D files around into different environments like Unreal Engine. One thing I have run into is measuring units mid-Mach, whatever that means. What unit system does the AVP think in?
I don't know what... I don't actually know.
Is Mach a measurement of?
Yeah, I think as you're mixing them together, but I think that, I don't know. I'm going to guess that they're thinking it could be absolute units too that they're all converting to. So I'm not 100% sure.
Do these normally work in the metric world or in the?
Everything works so far. Like, so what happens is that you scan it because it's when you're using the LIDAR, you're using it in real life terms. So you're doing, whatever it measured, the LIDAR is measuring it and then putting it out as an object, and that object is the right scale. So you don't have there's not a scaling issue there. And I think that in the file, I think it defines what the scale is and whether it's centimeters or inches. I think that's in the header. So I think it's just converting to what it should be in the real world units. But I haven't, so Unreal might not be able to do that. I think that Apple, if you're bringing objects in that were captured by LIDAR and then bringing them in, they're going to have scale. But I don't, a lot of times what I do is I have an object that I've defined in the scene as like 1 meter by 1 meter or 1 decimeter by 1 decimeter or something that is like, this is a box and I know how big it is, and so I know that will represent it. So then that's my point of reference as to whether this object is the right size or not. But the most important thing is that all of your things are the same. So you can fix the scale of a scene as long as you keep all your objects related to each other effectively. Next question.
Next one comes in from Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida. Have you used the feature in Polycam to create HDRI? I
have not used the feature to create HDRIs in Polycam. So, high dynamic range images, oftentimes I'm using as I use those for lighting models mostly, and I capture globes with those. And so there's a variety of either capturing a silvered globe or capturing, with a even a little theta. There's apps that will talk to it and have it shoot 9 exposures, which we can pull back together. And I've shot pretty complicated ones with wide angle cameras, but I have not even thought of using Polycam for that. So I'll take a look at it. Next question.
Next one comes in from Baraboo, and Rick Markley asks, I love my Luma Labs app. How are Gaussian splats looking in AVP?
I just started playing with it, and I haven't looked at very many a Gaussian splat. So a Gaussian splat it's not a true model. So what you're doing is you're grabbing this data, and the Gaussian splat is it's kind of reproducing that model based on that information that was all gathered, but it's not a true 3D model that's there. And I have to admit, because mostly what I want to do with it is true 3D models. If I want to be able to, move through it, use it as a model and oftentimes remodel it and so on and so forth, because I'm not really getting geometry. I've spent less time. I think the Gaussian splats look really impressive, And it's probably a whole another second hour on Gaussian splat, which I know some people who can talk a lot about it. So we'll see if we can bring them in, but it's not something I've dug into too deeply. I can say that most of my 3D experiences in the Apple Vision Pro have been pretty stellar. I think that it's hard to really understate how powerful it is to be able to have to be able to grab onto a model and look around at it. And again, for me, the most impressive has been, I've talked about before, is jig space, and just being able to see that, being able to walk around something, circle it in 3D. Pretty cool. Next question.
Comes in from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Polycam, Scaniverse, or Matterport are my 3 favorite 3D modeling programs. Which one makes the most realistic model with the least amount of image breakup and degradation and incompleteness?
So it depends. They're all used differently. Scaniverse I haven't used as much. Matterport now I have a Matterport piece of hardware. So before that, they were using the Microsoft Connect. So they were using the Connect soft hardware to build 3D models of spaces, and so we've done that as a previs for spaces as well.
Is the models one that has a turntable on it?
There is a
distance.
Scaniverse, I think, might have that. Matterport is inside out, so it has a little thing that'll turn your tripod
camera.
And I bought it and paid for it and everything else, and haven't really used it that much because I'm just used to wandering around and taking pictures. And so I found that it just wasn't in the same. It could work really well. I just haven't tested it very heavily because I was doing it differently.
But since the camera doesn't move, it can't handle occlusion from that point of view of the camera.
But what you do is you shoot it from different angles. And so then it'll slowly build that model.
Several places.
Yeah, so that's what we've done is, that's the thing you do when you start to scan spaces is to do that. One thing that's really interesting about Polycam, which we're just starting to test, is when you set it to room mode, it doesn't try to capture all the polygons. It's just looking for the corners. And so it'll just start drawing lines along the corners of your room and just give you a nice little block outline, which I have to admit didn't know it existed until about 2 weeks ago, and then was now. So I'm just starting to play with that. We'll play with that more in the future. Next question.
Coming in from our own Mickey Macature in the Philippines, in Manila. I said, what would be required to production line the creation of USDZ models of physical goods for a store like Amazon does? What is needed for capture, processing steps, and what manpower is required?
Yeah, so the Amazon's been doing them in different ways. I know that for a while, I don't think they still have them right now, but Amazon had a pretty big team in Seattle that was building 3D models. And so what they would get is they'd get a bunch of photos. They'd get some photogrammetry-driven photos that were driven from China oftentimes, because those are where a lot of the stuff was manufactured. And in the warehouse, they had a space. People would just take the pictures, and then they would build they would get the 3D models, but they weren't clean enough to use, and they weren't articulating, and they weren't clean enough to use. And so then they had modelers building them out. So they were building those all out in Maya. And I don't think I would choose Maya for that. A little heavy-handed to do that, but they had I think that they built a lot of custom tools. Maya is really extensible, and I think they built some custom tools. This is all the very limited amount that I know about how Amazon has been doing these. And so they're pretty clean models for those inserts. So those are not, I don't think that Amazon is using the photogrammetry that they captured as the final model that you see. I think that because one of the other things they want to do is change colors. So they're having, you'll have a couch and you'll be able to change the colors. You'll be able to change all the bits and pieces of whatever the options are. And so usually it needs to be rebuilt, but it's much faster. One of the keys with this LIDAR, and you may look at some of the models I show you and you go, it's okay. But being able to snap to that information and then build your buttons and build your things and build it's much, much faster when you have something to snap to. Even but when I was at ILM, we used to use CyberScan, which was a $200,000 scanner, and we would scan objects. We would never use that object in production, but it was so much faster to model that object from that than it was to try to look at photos or look at the model or whatever. And so I think that you want to look at you need a modeling pipeline, and that modeling pipeline could be Blender. I think that for texturing something that looks really realistic, you're probably going to still look at something. There's a variety of different things. So there's body paint inside of Cinema 4D. There is Substance. and there's a couple Mari, there's another one, but you can figure out how to build ZBrush, another one, where you can really figure out how to refine some of these models, add textures. But the thing you're going to have to think about is you have to separate all those surfaces. You have to map the UVs and separate all the surfaces so that they can accept different textures and different lighting and so on and so forth. So when you capture it, you're capturing something. I think that the capturing is excellent for maybe a sales presentation, educational examples, sending things out. And I think as you get started, you can use those. I think Apple oversells that feature a little bit, but because I think that you'll end up wanting to pretty quickly, you're going to end up wanting to remodel it. But the ability to remodel it perfectly quickly is much higher once you've actually captured it using photogrammetry and or LIDAR. I think that if I was going to do objects in the way Amazon does, I'd probably give it a turntable at the factory so that you have to move them as little as possible and give it a kind of a closed off space that was known. And then I would use multiple cameras. So like, for instance, the way 2K Games does the cameras, I think they have 150 cameras for a person, and you just go in and you just do your motions and you're taking all of them at the same time. And I wouldn't do all of them at the same time, but I'd probably put some kind of arm that had 5 or 6 of them that just let me just go around something real quickly and go snap, 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 move it on, and then let it generate the models from there. I think that there is a missing part here, which is someone building a piece of software that would control a bunch of iPhones or a bunch of cameras. I mean, you can do cameras, but a bunch of iPhones that would let them capture those and quickly make the models. But you can do that if you have a professional camera. Most of them have some kind of controller that can be used to fire off images. And so you can use that image to fire off all those cameras at the same time, or 5 or 6 of them at the same time while you rotate. And you can, again, either rotate them around the object, or you can take the advantage of rotating them around the object is because the lighting on the object stays the same. It gets harder if you rotate the object because the lighting will start to change. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I remember like 20 years ago, before there was LIDAR in a form that you could, build into a small device or a phone, they would have little projectors that would project a grid onto an item on a turntable, and they would turn that and would flash that grid on it, would capture pictures with that known scaled grid to generate the 3D object. Are they still using something like that? Or
not really? The grid was something that was really valuable when we didn't have the level of photogrammetry you have now. So what you do, one of the things that Metashape will do and other things will do is you put targets out. You can have targets that help it calibrate where it is. So they look like little QR codes, and they're little targets in the distance. And so when they overlap, they can help the cameras. And that's what, again, if you look at what how it's done, by 2K Games, they have hundreds of targets that are giving you most of that data for you. But they don't use those grids. And I remember what you're talking about. They just haven't used them for a decade.
And the other question is, as we step into the future, is after seeing Sora and how it creates a worldview from ingesting a large number of videos that can apparently reproduce 3D space that it hasn't really scanned in, except by looking at a lot of different videos and putting that amalgamation together. I'm not even sure how it does it. Is it possible that AI is going to increase the ability to 3D scan just by referring the object that you're looking at to its corpus of data that it has ingested for 3D?
Well, it can, and I think that one of the things we're seeing, like for instance, for movement, is to do that. So one of the things that the NFL is doing is, or some R&D unit that's next to the NFL. But one of the things you can see is this. I think they posted some stuff online about scanning the characters, scanning players, but then driving the motion from the video cameras. So you drive the motion of the video cameras, but then that's reproduced in the player.
They just map the player's bitmaps onto those.
Map the player's 3D models into the movement of the player during the. What's crazy is potentially live at some point
during the playback, like 3D or like Unreal Engine or something.
Yeah, and you can see some of that in some of the early stuff of that is Peyton Manning in the Monday things. He walks over to this board and you have guys running around and stuff like that based on the play, and that is all stuff that is a step towards that. It feels very much like the kind of the chessboard that they have on the Millennium Falcon. Like there's this all.
Yeah, I've noticed that they have kind of a 3D telestrator where they'll highlight the the quarterback, and it'll show like a little light shining down to him and draw a
that's
circle
just 2D.
around him.
Yeah, that's
But
2D.
then he moves and it follows
Right.
him.
Well, and that's just
with it.
tracking in 2D. But what's the next step for this, where you're probably going to see 3 to 5 years from now, you're
Then
going
it
to see
moves the camera. Yeah.
you're going to see the camera being able to go anywhere and show you what happened, in those areas, and then replays become very complicated, because how do you, how do you define that? Next question.
Comes in from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Galistio, New Mexico. How do you retain scale to the absolute most accuracy when capturing 3D models?
Use LIDAR. So LIDAR is structured you need either a reference model, something that's going to tell you what the scale of that scene is when you're taking the photos, or use LIDAR, because the LIDAR is structured light. It knows what the distances are, whereas unstructured light is the photogrammetry. It doesn't know anything. It just knows that these things are related and how they're related. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. It says, I have an iPhone 14 Plus. Would I need an iPhone 15 to capture 3D models, or could the 14 do it to an extent?
The 14 will do it almost exactly the same as the 15. So this technology hasn't changed dramatically. I think that the 13 or 12 was the first ones that had LIDAR in them. I don't think that the LIDAR has gotten any higher resolution. I don't think that's changed in all these in the updates. And so for capturing this stuff to Polycam, I don't think there's any difference between the 14 and the 15. All right.
One question I had relating to the last question. If you have a picture of a model and you took your 3D calipers, which measure things to 1,000th of a millimeter, could you just measure between 2 points and identify those points on a photo and say it's 14.506 millimeters between these 2 points, and just enter that in and have it do the scaling?
Yeah.
Use that to do the scaling for the rest of the
Yeah,
object.
you can definitely define an area and have it depends on the tools that you're using, but there's definitely tools that will let you say this distance to this distance. And like, for instance, that can happen in solution can be done in Metashape. Metashape will just tell you the distance between the 2 points is a certain amount, and then you can figure that out. Looks like another question snuck in.
Okay, from Tommy Schatz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Where do the RTEC, EinScan, etc. cameras come into play?
Yeah, so these are object scan. I mean, typically handheld. I think if I remember correctly, and I'll have to look at this, but I believe these are handheld object scanners, and we use them, for that, to grab on. Yeah, so RTEC makes a variety of different ones. So these are the 3D scanners. So this is similar to, they have some handheld ones where you just kind of, they're using LIDAR to grab onto that data, and you can kind of move it around. And we use them in visual effects. We use them especially when you want to grab objects. These are a different level of expense. I mean, I think they range from $10,000 to $100,000, for these types of scanners. The little one that I have is a BLK 360, but you can get up to ZNFs and Pharaohs are other ones that live in this world. And so, like, I did a measurement last week for a space, and I used my 360 in the space to grab it all. But as a backup, I went through with Polycam and just grabbed it. And also, it lets me know how accurate Polycam was. They overlap pretty well, but obviously I got a lot more data. So these capture 1 to 2 million points a second. So you're generating much denser files from these, especially in smaller spaces. And so they're great. And again, I have one and I use it pretty often in this environment. So they're definitely they're going to be much more accurate. The problem is that there's a sparseness to it. So if you think about a LIDAR and it's capturing lots of stuff, close to it because it's spinning and it's scanning down this whole area. Well, then how dense this is, if you take these lines and project them out, as you go further away, those points get further apart. Now, there's a million of them, so there's a lot of them, but the distance between the points that it's measuring gets larger and larger as you go further away. So that means that in a small room, you'll get tons of data, but as you move away, the space between those points starts to become wider and wider and wider, and that means your solution is going to be less accurate. So
And the
density makes a
Archon,
difference.
that Artec Micro is apparently accurate to 5 microns. I guess because it's so small, you're putting the thing that you're going to scan on this little stage here, and it rotates it within, like half a meter. I mean, a foot or so. So you're measuring stuff fairly small and fairly accurately.
And a lot of this stuff is used to oftentimes to reverse engineer things. So you see, you take something, you put it in there, and you scan it, and then you put it back into a CAD system. And the CAD systems have different tools to let you resurface those and do a pollinization of that surface, or to add NURBS or other things that are going to describe those surfaces. And so those are for typically our industrial scale. And you will use them if you're going to build a model that you're really working on. If you really want to build something out, again, a lot of times for quick things, I want to throw into my education thing, a sales thing, whatever. I want to show you something rotated around. Capturing this stuff is going to make a big difference. I want to articulate it. I want it to be photoreal. I want to be able to change surface colors, those types of things. You're talking about something that takes a little bit more effort. But these scans will take you a long way there to, figure out what you want to do. Where the scans work, like what you saw with Anchor Watt, they work really, really well on organic things that aren't perfectly smooth because they have tons of data to work from. They have tons of things to grab onto, and it's really easy for them to build those models. Flat, smooth, mechanical surfaces are the hardest thing for photogrammetry to do well. All right. Well, thank you so much to the incredible questions that kept this hour going and the first hour. Thanks to the panelists who came in and made sure that we had a conversation. It was sparse but effective. We had a good panel.
I did my best.
Everybody did great. So we had a great first hour, great second hour. Thanks to the incredible team on the back end that, of course, makes all of this possible. That helps develop all the tools that makes it, that cuts the show. That figures out what we're going to talk about each week. We really appreciate everybody's effort there. We traveled 49,000 miles, that's 79,000 kilometers, and that is 391 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
And those are 3D bananas too.
3D bananas, yeah, in space. 3D bananas in space. Yes.
It's mapped around the world. We'll have to generate a 3D model of that updates itself depending upon the number of bananas.
Yes. Oh, man. I think that somewhere in there's a banana particle system that wants to get done. Yeah, auto banana generator.
Just looking at them scanning President Obama in 3D, that they actually brought this scanning system into the White House.
Now, that was Paul Debevec did that.
Paul Debevec, that's
he's a friend. He's a good guy. Smart.
So we have a great 3D model of Obama's head. So, there you are.
I'll see if I can get Paul in. He's on my list. I just have to reach out to him. So, let's see. All right.
Very good. Bye-bye.